Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to the fourth and final part of our look at the superb career of Dale Hawerchuk. In parts 1 and 2, we looked at his rise to iconic status and becoming a bona fide legend in Winnipeg, and becoming one of the best players in the league. Now, despite the love of the town, his teammates, and having a GM such as John Ferguson who built a great work morale in Winnipeg, the team was only having an occasional brush with success and really not progressing any further. But what really drove Dale away from the city was GM Mike Smith, who took over, and Coach Bob Murdoch. And as one of my subscribers pointed out, Bob Murdoch once said, "The only difference between Pat Elnick and Dale Hawerchuk was ice time." Oh, okay, you done laughing? Yeah, it took everything in me not to laugh. But moving forward. So Dale was traded to the Buffalo Sabres, a team where he was sought out to be the final missing piece of a puzzle for a possible cup contender. Unfortunately, the organization was all over the place. They couldn't get certain aspects of their game on track. Despite having talents such as Dave Anderchuk, Pierre Turgeon, Pat LaFontaine, Alex McGillney, and several others, there was always something wrong with the team, and instead Dale spent 5 years trying to turn them back into a contender. One thing about his tenure there that however stood out was that he changed the way he played, as he wasn't the top center like he was in Winnipeg, or at least not touted to be, although in a lot of ways ended up being so. His purpose with the club was to help head up their power play, which was consistently one of the best in the league and sometimes the absolute best during his time there. Of course, everyone in Buffalo who was alive at the time remembers the infamous sweep over Boston in the 1993 playoffs, and Dale's play in those playoffs was among the best on the team. In the lockout short in 1994-95 season, however, Dale went into a dispute with Sabres management and was actually suspended by the team the day before the season was supposed to start back in October. Dale missed 25 out of 48 games, however, that season with groin issues and later on hip issues, which caused him to miss 3 playoff games. Before that, in his prior 13 seasons, he only missed 16 games in the regular season and 5 playoff games in 12 appearances. And when you play as long and as many games as Dale has, even at the young age of 32, as an athlete you start to question where your career is going to end up, and the wear and tear on your body starts to begin, even if you've already accomplished what Dale has. He has had his tremendous success internationally, winning 2 Canada Cup titles for Team Canada in 1987 and 91, playing great in both tournaments, especially in the former, and had a silver and 2 bronzes in the World Ice Hockey Championship tournaments. But he didn't have the biggest prize yet, the Stanley Cup. In 9 seasons with the Jets, he made the playoffs 8 times, and the team only won 2 playoff series. In Buffalo, he made it all 5 seasons, but only had 1 series win. Of course, it was very memorable. So for the first time in his career, he's testing the free agent market, going into his 15th season in 1995-96, and with that, he signs a deal with the St. Louis Blues as a Group 3 unrestricted free agent. The St. Louis Blues weren't a very hard choice for Dale to make, as the man steering the ship for the GM box and behind the bench is Mike Keenan. I mentioned in the previous videos, Mike Keenan was Dale's coach during his junior B days, and when Dale won the Memorial Cup with the Cornwall Royals, his first of 2 in 1980, Keenan was coaching opposite him as the bench boss of the Peterborough Petes. Keenan, of course, coached against Dale several times in the NHL since becoming a professional coach in the 84-85 season, and coached him twice more in the Canada Cup tournament. Keenan was always controversial in many ways, but he got results more often than not during his tenure in the NHL, which culminated in a Stanley Cup win as coach of the New York Rangers in 1994. At that point, the teams Keenan had coached had made 4 Stanley Cup Finals appearances with the win in New York. Although it seemed Keenan was becoming more power-hungry, even a few years before that as the GM of the Blackhawks, I would say. And I always say if Keenan retired in 1994 and moved to a front office role primarily wherever, he would have been a first-ballot Hall of Famer. He arrived to St. Louis during the lockout short 94-95 season, and the Blues had a decent year, but were upset by the Canucks in the playoffs. The Blues were touted to be the team of the 90s with the emergence of superstar Brett Hull. Hull at this point was a Hart Trophy winner as league MVP, won the Pearson as Players' Choice MVP, a Lady Byng winner, a 3-time first-team All-Star, and a 5-time 50-goal scorer, including totals of, get this, 70 goals, 72 goals, and 86! The problem was the Blues just couldn't get past the second round of the playoffs. Sound familiar? So the higher-ups felt since Keenan was coming off of a Stanley Cup, hey, he'd be perfect for this job. And Keenan did make some good moves at first. Don't at me, as the kids say. After his first season in St. Louis, he actually parted ways with Brendan Shanahan in an effort not to have him sleep with teammates' wives anymore. They sent him to Hartford and got Chris Pronger in return. Not bad. And the team now had Al MacInnis on their defense as well, who was a multi-time All-Star in Calgary for 11 seasons. And like Dale, he was part of that 1981 draft class. But the Blues also signed ready forward Shane Corson this season and obtained Jeff Courtnall, and they had two-way specialists Esa the Pest Tikkanen, and others up front such as Brian Noonan, Adam Creighton, and Craig Johnson. Joining McInnes and Pronger on defense is Jeff Norton, Murray Barron, and veteran Jay Wells. And a net, a former rival of Dale's during his Jets days, and his former teammate in Buffalo, Grant Fuhr. Now there's something here they can build on, no doubt, and there's not quite a Stanley Cup winner yet, but there's something deep there, but only one thing can stop them. And sadly, that's Mike Keenan. And just before the season started, he traded Guy Carbonneau, yes, one of the best two-way forwards and defensive forwards in the game, for Paul Broughton. You might know who he is. Not near as good as Neil, or even as good as Aaron. He's that Broughton brother, yes. Spoiler, he plays all of 17 games for the Blues. Carbonneau plays 5 seasons in Dallas and collects his 3rd Stanley Cup ring while he's there. Dale, however, just wants to play, and he got off to a pretty good start with 2 goals and 6 assists for 8 points in 10 games and an excellent +5. He had an incredible game with 1 goal and 3 assists for 4 points in a win over Brendan Shanahan and the Whalers. Assists coming on Pronger's game winner and Hull's insurance marker. Speaking of Hull, he was stripped of his captaincy by Keenan, and this is where the media headlines about the tension between the two started materializing, and here's why that happened. Dale missed a game this month, but not due to injury. It was going to be Dale's return to Buffalo, and his ailing grandmother, who was on borrowed time, lived very close by in Fort Erie, Ontario, and wanted to come see him play one last time. Keenan benched him. Yes, because he could. Yeah, show him who's boss, piece of shit. Hull screamed at Keenan, and this was allegedly why he lost the captaincy, and that he'd worn on the sweater since 1992. This is doomed from the get-go. Dale had a bit of a rough November, but still had a couple of great games, and they were both against his former team. He had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points at home against the Jets, assisting on Noonan's game winner. Also, the Jets were no longer about to be in Winnipeg anymore, and the team's finances were pretty bad, and the city wouldn't support a new arena at the time. And so this could very well be Dale's last trip to the Winnipeg Arena, and he got a huge ovation when he was named first star of the game on November 30th. In total, he had a goal and 8 helpers for 9 points, 14 games. Also, in November, Keenan has gotten rid of Esa Tikkanen for a draft pick they'd end up sending to Colorado for nothing. Tikkanen would play 203 more games in the NHL. Backup goaltender Pat Jablonski for veteran defenseman J.J. Dania to Montreal, which wasn't a terrible trade on paper. Dania would only play all of 37 games in St. Louis. Jablonski would play 40 games in Montreal. Dale, however, had an incredible month in December. 2 goals, 12 assists for 14 points in 13 games. It was a really good +6. He had 3 assists to open the month against Doug Wayne, a sluggish Edmonton Oilers club. The Western Road Trip also saw him notch 2 assists against former teammate Alex McGillney in a sad-looking Canucks club. He did the same in a loss, however, to Stevie Y in the Russian 5 at home against Detroit. And then Dale had 1 goal and 2 helpers against Wendell Clark and Captain the sinking New York Islanders. And despite how well Dale was playing, the Blues were a game below 500, and Keenan got rid of sophomore Ian LaPerriere to the New York Rangers for Stéphane Matteau. Because Keenan liked him, you see. He coached him in Chicago and New York. Matteau lasted 120 games with the Blues before leaving. LaPerriere would play 1,012 games for the rest of his career in the NHL. In January, Dale had no assists and scored his 9th and 10th goals of the year in a win over the still sucky yet somewhat growing Senators on the road on January 29th. The next stop was Toronto at the storied Maple Leaf Gardens on January 31st, 1996, as the Blues take on the Leafs, led by Dale's former Cornwall Royals teammate, Doug Gilmour. Dale's had a history of performing very well at Maple Leaf Gardens. Some of his best games were played there since his rookie year. In the third period, the Blues were leading 1-0 as Fuhr and Leafs all-star netminder Felix Potvin were putting on quite a show. Craig Johnson had the puck and got it to Rob Parsons, and Dale Hawerchuk at 10:26 of the third period scored career goal number 500. In his 1103rd game, Dale becomes just the 23rd player in NHL history at the time to reach the mark. As I mentioned in the last video, his first point was indeed on a goal on October 9, 1981 on New York Rangers goalie Steve Baker. Just over 14 years later, on Felix Potvin, he reaches another monster milestone. It happened in the arena where he watched the Leafs play on his TV growing up in Oshawa. It is where he has had many headline-grabbing performances. It was only fitting that it happened at Maple Leaf Gardens, and the Toronto faithful, who used to boo him quite a bit because of how well he played there, stood up and gave him the respect he deserved. In this month, Dale had 6 goals and no helpers and was an even 0 in 11 games. The The Blues, however, found themselves a game above 500 after the victory over Toronto. But Maniac Mike was still making moves and shakes, sending Jeff Norton and Donald Dufresne to Edmonton for Igor Kravchuk and Ken Sutton. Kravchuk played 122 games in St. Louis. Sutton, who was Dale's former teammate in Buffalo, played all of 6. While Dufresne didn't last and played 64 games in Edmonton, and Norton had injury issues and didn't last in Edmonton at all, he still played 369 more games in his career. Also, Rob Pearson, who I just mentioned, who assisted on Dale's 500th goal, just arrived in a trade from Washington a couple days before and played 45 games for the Blues, while Dennis Chasse, who they got rid of, would only play 25 more NHL games. So, hey, Keenan won a trade! February, however, was an ugly month for Dale, as problems internally with Keenan and his team are making the rounds in the media. It is everywhere, and our hero had the biggest slump of his career. Just 1 goal and 2 assists for 3 points in 13 games and a -2. Keenan just kept shuffling everything around, game after game it seemed. And the Blues only won 5 games all month while our hero was still battling his old injuries. It didn't seem to make sense that he fell this far down. However, on February 27, 1996, the Blues made a big deal to LA, parting ways with Craig Johnson, Patrice Tardif, Roman Vopat, 5th-round draft pick in 96, 1st-rounder in 97, all for Wayne Gretzky. Yes, that Wayne Gretzky. Dale had played against Wayne upon dozens of times in the last 15 seasons, and they had been teammates in 26 international games, totaling 3 tournaments, and in all 4 All-Star games Dale played in, they were teammates. You had Gretzky, Hull, and Hawerchuk. Wow, how can Mike Keenan screw this up? You doubt the man, don't you? But, I mean, he didn't play well with him. In 5 games in March, he had a goal, and that was in a win over Hartford. On March 12, 1996, he played in a loss against Theo Fleury and the Calgary Flames. It was a +1, as his ice time was getting severely cut, and he had just played his last game for the St. Louis Blues. The trade deadline approached, and on March 15, 1996, as Maniac Mike's obsession with former Oilers players who kicked his team's asses in the 80s in some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome, I guess, he traded Dale Hawerchuk to the Philadelphia Flyers for defensive forward specialist Greg McTavish. Yes, another player Keenan had playing for him in New York as well. That's where his obsession with former Oilers players began. As yes, after this trade, he would also go on to acquire Charlie Huddy and Glenn Anderson. This trade, however, wasn't the worst thing for Dale after all. He was clearly undervalued in St. Louis, and Keenan was going every which way, and it didn't help matters, just as it seemed the Blues were starting to improve. Dale's short time in St. Louis saw him score 13 goals and 28 assists for 41 points in 66 games, as he had only missed 1 game this season so far, and we all know why that is. And things seem to be clicking between a line of Dale, Corson, and Hull. Hull set up Dale 4 times, almost a third of his goals, while Dale returned the favor 9 times to the Golden Bread. And he and Corson collaborated on 3 assists, as also Dale did with Al MacInnis and Jeff Norton. The top line was working, things seemed to be going okay, but Keenan being Keenan just jumbled things around. Even though Dale was working well with the other talents for a short while, his production slipped into a downright bad slump, and he would never recover in St. Louis. Thanks a lot, Mike. It's pretty sad you come to a team because someone you trust who has coached you many times is in charge, but is starting the era where he tarnishes his legacy and gets drunk on power, makes trades for the sake of simply making trades, try and look busy, boss, and spites you and your ailing grandmother. You are clicking on the top line, so you get shuffled in return and can't find consistency. I guess it was also clear that Dale was going to be demoted due to acquiring Gretzky, but Keenan of all people should remember how well they played together. They were only teammates 4 games. But despite this, however, Dale still was able to put on a show in the first few months, and he still had something to offer. He was also a +5. Dale's time in St. Louis will primarily be known for the glorious moment where he scored his 500th goal, so at least he can take that with him. But despite how well he played there, like the other 2 teams he played for, he's going to be faced with non-stop problems as things with Keenan just got a whole lot worse in St. Louis, to the point where he'd be fired 30-plus games into the next season, and continues to look like a complete jackass the rest of his NHL career. So the most brief tenure of Dale's career would be in St. Louis, but thankfully he wouldn't have to be stuck there. And sadly, the lack of respect Dale has gotten in his career is pretty sad at this point, and got even worse here. John Ferguson may have made his share of mistakes as GM in Winnipeg, but he was at least a GM who cared about his players. Mike Keenan only cares about Mike Keenan. Despite Keenan making this trade, likely because he was bored, Bob Clark, the general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers, was a fan of Dale, and he needed him badly as Michael Renberg, part of the Legion of Doom line I referenced in part 3 of this series, has been having injury issues all season. So Dale would be used a lot in the wing, but also in checking situations, as Terry Murray, the Flyers head coach, was also a huge fan of this trade. The LOD line was led by Eric Lindros and John LeClair. The Flyers also still had Rod Brindamore. Also up front, in addition to Dale, they have acquired Pat Falloon earlier in the season, and he can still produce pretty well. And grinding forwards such as Jean Podine, as well as longtime Calgary Flames veteran Joel Otto and Dan Quinn. On defense, they had all-star Eric Desjardins, also Dale's former Buffalo teammate Peter Svoboda. Also, they had Chris Therien, Carl Dykos, and veteran Kjell Samuelsson. Veteran Ron Hextall, an icon among Flyers fans, was the man between the pipes, still playing excellently, and backed up by the very reliable Garth Snow. And Dale, for the first time in his career, joined a team that was actually somewhat of a real contender. The Flyers were 32, 21, and 13 when he joined them, and they had 16 games remaining. And his first game as a Flyer was against the Jets at the Spectrum on March 16th, 1996. It was given quite a bit of ice time, and he had 4 shots on goal. He went pointless, but the Flyers still got the win. The next game, they hosted a pathetic Sharks team, where Dale's former teammate Doug Bodger of the Sabres was now playing. And Dale was shifted on both the checking line and LOD line, as Renberg didn't even play. And he excelled. What a game he played. He assisted on a Joel Otto goal to make it 3-1. Then on the power play in the second period, Lindros is in control. He gives it to Dale, who sets up John LeClair. It was 7-1 after that, as LeClair had a hat trick. And nearly 12 minutes into the third period, LeClair to the Big E to Dale Hawerchuk, the 503rd goal of his career, his 14th of the season, his first as a Flyer. Dale is named third star of the game with 1 goal and 2 assists for 3 points, while Lindros is the second star as he had 4 helpers, and LeClair, of course, with a huge hat-trick and an assist, was the first star. The very next game, he had 2 assists in a 4-1 win against Highliner and the Islanders. On March 22nd, 1996 would be a very special night for Dale, as he got one more chance to play at the Winnipeg Arena. Tickets for every Jets game at this point were pretty red hot as the season was winding down and their time in Winnipeg was coming to a close, as they were still battling actually for the final playoff spot. Ticket prices weren't insane for this game, but the Winnipeg faithful paid tribute to their hero, as he was welcomed during introductions to a standing ovation and chants of his name that he hadn't heard in quite some time. He skated around the ice he called home for 9 seasons. It was a big moment. Signs of the crowd honoring him, people wearing his jersey, and despite how Dale has always gotten the respect he deserved, though, throughout a lot of his career, people of Winnipeg told him that night, "We haven't forgotten." That night as well, Dale also went into the faceoff circle with a rookie by the name of Shane Doan. The Flyers would lose that game, but roared back, and so did our hero. He went on quite the little point streak to end the month, as on March 23rd he had a goal and assist in a win over the Leafs. Then it was old division rivals Hartford, where he assisted on goals for LeClair and Lindros. Then a game against the Senators, where he had a goal and a helper. Then he returned to Buffalo for the first time since leaving, and he was actually booed quite heavily, as he went to the faceoff circle with former Sabres teammate Pat LaFontaine. Last one, I swear. But Dale had the last lap when he notched 2 assists in the Flyers' win. And then in a huge win over Francis Yager and the powerful Lemieux Penguins, Dale, along with Eric, assisted on 2 John LeClair goals. The Flyers were rolling, and in that 5-game winning streak, Dale had 2 points each game, meaning he averaged 2 points a game. 2 goals, 8 assists for 10 points, it was a +7. His first month as a Flyer, 9 games, 3 goals, 12 assists, 15 points, and a huge +10. Dale was fitting in like a glove in the city of brotherly love. Dale finished the final stretch of the season very well with 1 goal, 4 assists for 5 points, and an even 0 in 7 games in April, as the Flyers finished 45, 24, and 13 for 103 points. First place in our division, first place in the entire Eastern Conference. This is the first time in Dale Hawerchuk's 15-year career he's on a first-place team of any kind. And when Dale joined the team, they went 13-3-0 in that stretch. Looked like the old Dale was back, and oh yes, now it's truly time to get excited for a playoff time. Awaiting the Flyers in the first round is the upstart Tampa Bay Lightning in their 4th year of existence, making their first playoff appearance in team history with a pretty good record of 38, 32, and 12 for 88 points. They were coached by Terry Crisp, who had Stanley Cup success in 1989 with the Calgary Flames. And as their head coach ever, Crisp had calmed his temper a bit with the help of general manager Phil Esposito. Yes, I'll give Espo a little credit for the things he did in Tampa Bay. They put together a hard-working team of hungry young players and veterans who had been written off in their careers, but feel they can still offer a lot. Tampa actually had a better power play during the season than the Flyers did. While the Flyers had the second best penalty kill in the league, the Lightning were bad with 5th in place in that regard. So this could be an interesting series when it comes to special teams. The Lightning were led by Brian Bradley, who struggled to get his footing during stints in Calgary, Vancouver, and Toronto as they all gave up on him, and he excelled as the Lightning's first real star in their history. Alexei Solovanov led the team with 31 goals, while veteran Peter Klima still had something to offer, and former Minnesota North Stars all-star Brian Bellows provided veteran leadership but can still score some goals. He's just 3 years removed from his Stanley Cup win in Montreal. Rob Zamner provided size up front, while team captain Paulie Eisebert was focused on moving this team to the next level. He had former Penguins and Whalers all-star John Cullen, youngster Chris Gratton, and tough guy Sean Burr. The defense was led by the man who commanded the power play, the Bolts' first ever first-round draft pick, Roman Hamrlik. He was joined by a former teammate of Dale's, Bill Holder from Buffalo, Corey Cross, 11-year veteran David Shaw, and another seasoned vet in Michel Petit. And in net, someone Dale knew from his days in Buffalo, goaltender Darren Pupa, whose career had been revitalized in Tampa. Here we go. Game 1 at the Spectrum in Philly, and just 55 seconds into the game, it's John LeClair to Dale Hawerchuk. 1-0 Flyers, and they would lead 3-0 after 1. In the second period, it's the new Legion of Doom line, Ducky to the Big E to JL, baby. 4-0 Flyers. They walked away with this one 7-3 pretty easily, taking the first game. Game 2, early on, Gratton takes a cross-checking penalty, and the Flyers are on the power play, and Dale steals a loose puck and makes a huge individual effort and scores! Just 1:48 in. The Flyers couldn't get anything going the rest of the game. Goaltenders Puba and Hextall are looking sharp, but Tampa's defensive play has also tightened up in this one. The Flyers clung on to a 1-0 lead, but the Bolts tied it. The third period, as the clock winds down, we're off to overtime, but just 9:05 in, however. Brian Bellows silences the rowdy fans in Philly, and the series is tied. Lindros and LeClair were pointless, with the latter just having one shot on goal. Game 3, welcome to Thunderdome. As the Tampa faithful are excited for their first taste of playoff hockey, the Flyers led 2-1 after one early in the second. Power play, Dale to Renberg to Pat Loon. Doesn't quite have the same ring, but either way, it's 3-1 Flyers, but Tampa ties it. It's 3-3 after 2. In the third period, a sort of new mix of the LOD line, a nice shovel as Renberg gets it to Hawerchuk, and he gets it to Eric Lindros. It's 4-3 Flyers, and time is winding down, but Bellows and his clutch play taunts our hero once again. As it's tying it with 1:19 to play, Solovanov scores the OT winner. The Flyers trail the series 2-1. What is happening here? This can't be happening. Not again. Dale does not deserve this. Game 4, the Flyers are done taking it easy. They toss the Bolts around all over the ice, despite the fact that there are some pretty big boys on that team themselves, and the defense is all over Tampa, and leading 2-1 in the second. Renberg beautifully sets up Dale for a goal to make it 3-1. Philly was in full control. They win it 4-1 and tie the series. Game 5, back in Philly, you can almost hear the sighs of relief of the Philly faithful as they come home. Oh boy. And the Flyers on this night just execute everything perfectly. Every facet of the game, they were in control of. Our hero was doing well in the face-off circle, leading 3-0 in the third period. Dale steers, Desjardins controls it, and LeClair scores it. And the Flyers led 4-0. The Bolts get one back, but it's too little, too late. Flyers lead the series 3-2. Game 6, back at Thunderdome in Tampa. Their fans still have faith, and the Bolts are struck down, however. They are just purely outmatched here in every way. It's the only game in the series where our hero actually didn't register a point. The clock ticks down, and the Flyers are moving on. Dale was incredible in this series, channeling what he brought to the Sabres in '93, and wins his first playoff series since that very year. 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in 6 games. He led the entire series in scoring and picked up the slack when Lindros and LeClair seemed out of it at times. Despite not playing as much playoff hockey as some of his peers, he understood it. I mean, he still has experience after all these years, and the trade is going to be working out very well for the Flyers. When Renberg seems to be still playing hurt, Dale has been waiting for this chance, however, at the big dance, and he's finally come to a team capable of getting there. Standing in their way the next round, however, was another team from Florida, and in their 3rd year of existence and making their first playoff experience, the Florida Panthers. They were a bit better than Tampa. They finished with 92 points and were the 4th-seeded team coming into the playoffs and disposed of Ray Bourque and the Bruins in 5 games. The Panthers, however, were pretty decent from the word go, thanks in large part to current Flyers GM Bob Clarke, who was the man in charge of their expansion year, as was head coach Roger Nielsen. They put together a very formidable expansion club. However, both of them were gone by the time the second season was over, as Brian Murray took over as GM and hired Doug McLean for this season as head coach. In many ways, they were similar to Tampa in terms of having hungry young players and grizzled vets. However, many of their veterans still seem to have plenty more to offer. They were led by Scott Mellenby, a gritty power forward with a lot of playoff experience from his days with the Flyers and Oilers. And he was in a role he wasn't used to, and that was being the team's forward star. But he thrived on it. Also, it was a breakout year for Rob Niedermeyer, as his hard work ethic also led him to produce well for the club, and he also brought size up front too. Swedish forward Johan Garpenlov looked to be the face of the Sharks early in his career, but was now doing some great things for the Panthers, and character players such as Stu Barnes, Jody Hull, and Bill Lindsay were all lending a significant hand, and they added former Red Wings star and former 50-goal scorer Ray Shepherd in a big trade. But the captain of the ship was veteran Brian Skrudlin, who was one of the best and most aggressive two-way forwards in the game. He's had 112 games of playoff experience and a Stanley Cup ring, as well as the two-way play of he and forward Tom Fitzgerald gave the Panthers a big edge. On defense, he had the hardworking core of Robert Svela, Jason Woolley, Gordon Murphy, veteran Terry Kirkner, in 1994 first overall pick, Ed Jovanovski. However, their biggest ace was in goal, and the biggest star on the team, former Vezina Trophy winner, the Beezer, John Van Beesbrook, who became the first icon of this Panthers club. Here we go. Game 1 at the Spectrum, and the Panthers' defensive checking is on point in this one. And whenever the Flyers could get to the Beezer, he turned them back the whole game. The Panthers can barely get to Hextall all game, but they got past him twice. And the Flyers dropped game 1 2-0. Dale had a couple shots on goal. Game 2, however, the Flyers launched out an all-out attack on Van Beesbrook and the Panthers, and they're spinning their wheels, but yet still led 1-0 after 1. Dykos tied the game for Philly, and then power play, LOD, version 2.0, start loading. Eric is buffering. Dale is at 99%, and Leclerc completes installation with a goal. Ah, yes, the Flyers led 2-1. The Panthers tied it in the third, but Eric Lindros scores what proved to be the game winner midway through the final frame, and the series is tied at 1. Game 3 at the Miami Arena, and the Flyers aren't letting up on their all-out attack. Power play goals by Quinn and Lindros give them a 2-0 lead after 1, and the Panthers close the gap to a goal to end the second. Hextall was really making some great saves. The Flyers defense was on point, and Trent Klatt scores the insurance marker 3-1 win. The Flyers take a 2-1 series lead. This is the first time in Dale's career he's ever had a lead in a second round series. He had 6 shots, but was held off the score sheet in the last couple of games. Game 4, however, the Panthers regroup. They lead 2-0 after 1, but in the second period, goals from Renberg and Brindamore, just 1:18 apart, tie it. But the Panthers killed their buzz with 6 seconds and left in the period to lead 3-2. Time is right now, and Beezer is standing on his head. Our hero needs to step it up, and with 1:07 left, Dale to Rod to Renberg. We're going to OT. But 4:06 in, Dave Lowry ties the series for the Panthers. Game 5, the Flyers don't look worried, and neither do their fans. Both teams are playing very good defensive strategy, and it's excellent hockey. It's 1-1 after regulation. Our hero has been very restricted and checked tightly in this game. As an OT, nothing was solved. Then we go to double OT at 8:05 in. Huff scores for the Panthers. The Flyers are on the verge of elimination. They only had 2 shots on goal. Game 6, back in the city where the heat is on, but it'll be the Panthers partying on the beach till the break of dawn. Beezer plays a monster game. Our hero is a -1. The Flyer season is over. You really have to sympathize with Dale here. After all the BS he went through in St. Louis, he was on a team that appreciated what he could offer and knew he could do a lot for them. Never before had he played on a first-place club. As a matter of fact, before this season, Dale only finished as high as second place with a given team, and that only happened once. He led the team with 30 shots on goal in this series, and sadly only had 2 assists in 6 games and was a -1. The Panthers had his number, and they would actually go on. Florida Panthers would go on to shock Mario Lemieux and the Penguins in 7 games in the conference final, but would actually lose the Stanley Cup in a sweep at the hands of the Colorado Avalanche, who are once known as the Quebec Nordiques. In the 16 games he played in Philly in the regular season, he was outstanding, Dale that is. 4 goals, 16 assists for 20 points. As the substitute member of the Legion of Doom line, he was incredible. Had amazing chemistry with Lindros and Leclerc the rest of the season. Leclerc set him up for all but 1 of his goals, and while all but 6 of Dale's assists were to Leclerc. And in total, they produced 15 goals together in just 16 games. Eric Lindros was the main assist collaborator with our hero. They helped each other out 7 times, nearly half of Dale's assists. In total, they produced 12 goals. Dale Hawerchuk told the world, after 15 seasons, I'm not done. He almost instantly forgot what he went through in St. Louis and shined bright once again. He was lined up with one of the hottest, most talked about forward lines in hockey, as Legion of Doom line intensified further when put together with Dale. The Flyers went 13-3-0 after they traded for him, and again, he gets his first regular season division title, and has 9 points in 12 playoff games. He was the best during his opening round series against Tampa. It may not have ended the way he wanted, with another playoff disappointment, but either way, he still had that passion for the game. And what a roller coaster ride it was. Dale, once again though, he was going to be put in a promising situation, only unlike Buffalo or certain years in Winnipeg, this was a lot worse. But he was able to show some spark in St. Louis, and achieved his 500 career goal. Despite being robbed of his chance to play alongside Gretzky, which he only did for 4 games, he was traded to the Flyers. It was a tremendous addition to the team. The Flyers went on a hot streak, and Dale was on last on a tried and true contender. Overall, he played 82 games, a full season, which that's how it was in starting in 95-96. He had 17 goals, 44 assists for 61 points, and finished the season up plus 15. The playoff heartbreak need not get him down, because the Flyers had decided to hang on to him for next season. So now we have reached season 16 for Dale Hawerchuk. His career has been quite the journey. While he had false hope of winning the Stanley Cup both in Winnipeg and Buffalo, he's not really been on a team that's seen as a giant contender, and on paper, the Flyers, after having 2 excellent regular seasons, one of which before Dale got there, and they have endured some playoff heartbreak of their own, but the odds makers have the Flyers tied for the second best odds of winning the Cup, with hated rivals Pittsburgh and just behind Detroit. Dale made it through 82 games last season, though it was rumored at the time he was still hiding his hip issues, but considering how well he played his first few months in St. Louis, and then how incredible he was in those final games with the Philadelphia Flyers in the first round of the playoffs, it seemed that his drive to achieve Stanley Cup success is what was keeping him moving forward. Dale, of course, was drafted first overall in 1981, and by the time the 1996-97 season was about to get underway, the first round draft class of 1981 still had 6 players in the NHL. Dale, of course, first overall was still there. Third overall picked Bob Carpenter, who had some really great seasons in Washington, didn't quite live up to the expectations and hype, but he still had a really good career, and after being a journeyman for a few years, found a home in New Jersey where he got himself a Stanley Cup ring. Ron Francis, taken 4th overall, has become one of the all-time greats, but like Dale, didn't get a lot of the recognition he deserved. I covered Ron's career on this channel, as he was originally drafted by Hartford, where he spent 10 years and became well beloved in that city, much like Dale did in Winnipeg, and now he's in Pittsburgh, where he's actually become somewhat of a bigger star due to his spotlight in that city, of course, due to Mario Lemieux, where he scored himself a couple Stanley Cup rings. Grant Fuhrer, who was the first goalie in that draft, taken in many years taken in the first round, was of course Dale's former teammate in both St. Louis and Buffalo, and still plays for the former, but is best known for his Stanley Cup days and being Dale's rival in Edmonton. James Patrick, taken 9th overall by the Rangers, spent many years there and had a brief stint in Hartford and ended up in Calgary. It was grossly underrated and was Dale's teammate on the Team Canada for the 1987 Canada Cup and the silver medal 1989 World Championship team. Then, of course, he had Al McInnes, taken 15th overall by Calgary, has gone on to become one of the all-time greats in his position, and was Dale's teammate in St. Louis as well as the 91 Canada Cup. He became an icon in Calgary and was still playing in peak form in St. Louis. Dale, however, craved the Stanley Cup success that Carpenter, Francis, Fuhrer, and McInnes had all achieved, as between them they had their name etched on the cup 9 times. Dale, however, got off to a really bad start, and even the Flyers as a whole were looking pretty sluggish. Eric Lindros was out of the lineup, and Dale had no points in 7 games. It was a really bad -7. And to make matters worse, he suffered a rib injury on October 16th against Paul Kariya, Teemu Selanne, and the Anaheim Ducks. Well, Muddy Ducks in Anaheim, tomato. Dale returned, however, after missing 6 games on November 2nd as the Flyers won a tight outing against defending Eastern Conference champions, the team that eliminated them, the Florida Panthers. Next game against the Islanders, Dale broke his slump with a goal and 2 helpers for 3 points. And yes, it was against the Isles, and hey Ziggy, you haven't been to see. Anyway, Dale was picking things up again in a game at home against the struggling Penguins. On November 21st, 1996, he was set up by Renberg and Svoboda for a goal to make it 2-0 in the first. Leading 4-2 in the third, he set up Leclerc for a helper. Then power play for Loon to Desjardins to Dale, his second goal of the game. And with 3:22 left, it's Leclerc to Renberg to Dale. A hat trick for our hero, his first since February 14th, 1992. He was named the first star of the game, got a tremendous ovation from the Flyers faithful. Once again, flashes of Dale's greatness were still ever present. And his first hat trick was in the first month of his career, October 25th, 1981. This is hat trick number 15, and it would prove to be the final one of his career. Dale had 13 points in 13 games. It was a +2 in November. And on November 30th, the Flyers beat the not-so-sucky Senators. And that began a 17-game unbeaten streak, including going undefeated in December in all 13 games. The return of Eric Lindros to the lineup was, of course, the big boost they needed. Dale, however, registered a point in all but 4 games that month. He had an assist against Ottawa, is where it started, of course, and it was on Trent Klatt's game winner. He then got an assist in a win over McGillney and the Canucks. With 6:35 to play, he assisted on an Eric Lindros goal, who was just against Gretzky, Messier, and the Rangers to get a tie. He then had a goal and an assist in a win over Modano and a very good Dallas Stars team. He didn't register any points against Florida, but did have an assist hosting Hartford, and 3 assists in a shutout win over the Whalers on the road, who were in their last year in Hartford. Then an assist in a win over Bourque and the brutal Bruins, and it had a helper against the men who've been to sea and the Islanders. After going pointless in wins over Hull and the Blues and Amani and the Hawks, he scored the opening goal and assist for a win over Curtis Joseph and an improving Oilers team, and then a goal and a helper against Fleury and the failing Flames. Then a goal came on a power play marker to tie the game early in the second period. The assist came on Leclerc's game winner. A helper in Vancouver after a win over the Sharks to ring in the new year, and they settle for a tie against the defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche. The Flyers, however, were down 4-1, and Dale, like he has in the past, got past Patrick Waugh to start a comeback to lead to the tie. The streak hit 17 games as they hosted Boston, where Dale had 2 goals, both on a power play marker, and a 7-3 win. On the streak, Dale had 6 goals, 12 assists for 18 points in 17 games, in a huge +16. The Flyers, however, ran into goaltender Corey Schwab and the Lightning, who had a hot night and ended their streak. And the NHL All-Star break was coming up. And for the first time since 1988, Dale Hawerchuk, who was one of the 2 special commissioner selections for the Eastern Conference, was selected to play in his 5th NHL All-Star game. It was a great show of respect from the league for Dale's contributions in the 16 years he had played in the NHL. And joining him were 3 other Flyers teammates, Eric Lindros for his 3rd selection, John Leclerc for his 2nd, and Paul Coffey, who the Flyers acquired from Hartford back in December, who's playing in his 14th NHL All-Star game. Dale played against him many times during his career, especially Coffey's days in Edmonton. They were also, again, teammates in the 87 and 91 Canada Cups. And speaking of Canada Cups, he played alongside alums Scott Stevens, Ray Bourque, and Mark Messier. Dale also got to be teammates one more time with Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. The All-Star roster on both sides featured a combined 26 future Hall of Famers. The Eastern Conference was leading 3-0 in the first period when Coffey got the puck to Lindros to Dale Hawerchuk. He got a goal en route to an 11-7 Eastern Conference win, the first time Dale had ever been on the winning side in an All-Star game. Upon returning from the break, Dale was looking pretty good. He actually scored a goal against the Dallas Stars, the 518th of his career. Little did we know it would be his last regular season goal. Dale's injury issues reared their ugly heads, starting with a strained groin injury during a January 25th game against Detroit. There were still 34 games left in the season when Dale suffered that injury, and he kept trying to come back, but constant groin problems and rib issues were taking him out of action as well as something else. It was clear his hip was deteriorating even further. After that game against Detroit, Dale would only play 9 of the next 34 games. On April 7, 1997, Dale stood up for a game against the New York Rangers, but didn't see much ice time. And it was the 1188th game of his career, and his last in the regular season. It was clear Dale's career was now on borrowed time. For him now, it's now or never. The Flyers did finish 45, 24, 13, the exact same record as last season for 103 points, but they didn't win their division, coming in second to a very powerful Devils club, but still finished 3rd in the Eastern Conference. Well, Dale is going to use every fiber of his being because for one more time, for the 15th time in his career, it's playoff time. There was a theme in my video about Joe Nieuwendyk during his time with the Dallas Stars facing the ghosts of his past. Dale would be in a similar situation, starting in the first round series as the Flyers would take on their most hated rivals, the Pittsburgh Penguins in the opening round. Dale would go into the face-off circle in this series against two men he knew very well. Ron Francis, who, as I of course mentioned many times, was in the same draft class, taken just 3 picks later and has credited a Hall of Fame career himself. And of course the magnificent one, Mario Lemieux, who was set to retire at the end of the year at just 31 years old. Now let me preface this by saying Dale never seemed to crave the spotlight that many talents such of this era had. But years later, many feel he deserves the adulation and credit as much as some of those other talents. The time reverts back to Dale winning that face-off draw, which led to Lemieux's infamous 1987 Canada Cup winning goal. And this is actually their first playoff meeting. The Pens actually had a disappointing year despite a winning record in 84 points, and Lemieux winning his 6th scoring title, and Francis was having a great year. Jágr, however, had a few injury issues, but was ready for this series. Peter Nedved was doing pretty good in Pittsburgh. And they also bolstered such forwards as Stu Barnes, veteran Eddie Olczyk, Ian Moran, and future Hall of Famer Joe Mullen in his final year. The defense had some talent, no doubt, with tough veteran Kevin Hatcher, nasty Darius Kasparaitis, Jason Woolley, and playoff veteran Craig Muni, and a man, again, Dale knew very well during his time in Winnipeg, Freddie Olofsson. Their goaltenders, however, had a rough year, but they go with veteran Ken Regan in net. So here we go. Game 1 at the brand new Core State Center where the Flyers started playing this year. Dale does not play, but the Flyers looked unstoppable as Lindros had a goal and 3 helpers for 4 points in a huge 5-1 Flyers win. Game 2, Dale does suit up and the Pens don't make it so easy. A Lemieux goal in the first carries all the way over to the third period as the Pens still led, but Joel Otto tied it. Jágr gets the Pens lead back, but Leclerc and Klatt score and the Flyers hang on to win 3-2 and take a 2-0 series lead. Dale won some key faceoffs and had a couple shots on goal, but his ice time was limited. Game 3, we're at the Igloo in Pittsburgh, and the Pens led 2-1 after 1, but goals from Falloon, Lindros, and Leclerc gave them a big 4-2 lead going into the third, and the Flyers went 5-3 and took a commanding 3-0 series lead thanks to a 3-point night from Renberg. Dale was primarily used in defensive and checking situations and was doing a pretty good job keeping Ron Francis at bay. Game 4, the Flyers look for the sweep, but it does not happen as Mario gets a shining moment in his home arena and the Pens win 4-1. Dale doesn't play much, he's a -1. Game 5, we're back in Philadelphia and it's quite the battle. Dale, for one last time, gets in the face-off circle with Ronnie Franchise as well as magnificent Mario. And thanks to a huge night from Brind'Amour, the Flyers win 6-3 and take this series in 5 games. After missing the opening game, Terry Murray knew he couldn't use Dale perhaps like he wanted to, but either way, he was still key in the face-off draws and was good at keeping hold of Ron Francis in a couple games. Not the most eventful series for our hero, but playing through the pain, he has now won the 5th playoff series of his career. But now it's to the second round, where Dale has never advanced past in his career, and past ghosts may come back to haunt him once again as his former team stands in his way, the Buffalo Sabres. However, a lot, has changed in the last 2 years since he has been gone. A new logo, a new arena, a new coach in Ted Nolan, who guided this team to 92 points. But despite the Flyers having the better record, the Sabres won their division, so they have the higher playoff seed. Now, Dominic Hasek was still their ace goaltender, winning awards like they're going out of style, his 3rd Vezina Trophy in 4 years, and his first Hart Trophy as league MVP. However, he is injured, and the Sabres have to go with Steve Shields. But this is different. This is playoff hockey in the NHL. The Sabres had a hard-working core, led by Derek Plant and Donald Odette, the latter of whom Dale spent a lot of ice time with. But they have a new star emerging in two-way specialist and leader, Mike Pekka, as well as Brian Holsinger, Jason Daw, Dixon Ward, Michael Grosek, tough guy Matthew Barnaby, and recently acquired Miroslav Jotan. On defense, Alexei Zhitnik, veteran Gary Galley, Daryl Shannon, Mike Wilson, and another former teammate of Dale's, Richard Smilik. The Sabres had gotten by an upstart Ottawa Senators club in a grueling 7-game series, so here we go. Can Dale finally reach the conference final? And how much gas does he have left running in his tank? Game 1 in Buffalo, the Sabres led 3-2 after 2 periods, but our hero was a warrior out there. He was hustling as best his body would let him, and it would pay off halfway through the 2nd period. And the Flyers, still trailing Falloon, had the puck, got it to our hero, who set up Brind'Amour. Dale's first point of these playoffs, and the game is tied. Podine scored the thrilling game winner with 48 seconds of play. Brind'Amour iced it with an empty netter. 5-3 win. Philadelphia takes game 1. It's the goaltender taking center stage in the next game, easy for me to say. Gar Snow, the Flyers, Shields of the Sabres put on a show. The Flyers take this one 2-1. A huge 2 games on the road, 2-game series lead. Dale is hustling like crazy out there. Game 3, we are in Philly, and the Flyers faithful are ready to keep going strong. In the first period on a power play, Dale, like he has so many times, takes control of the situation, gets it back to Coffey, and he puts it out there for Lindros. 1-0 Philly leads. 3:33 later, Garceau surveys the situation. Another power play, then it's Coffey to Dale Hawerchuk, his first goal of these playoffs. 2-0 Flyers. The Sabres get one back, but then it's the living legends, Paul Coffey and Dale Hawerchuk, setting up Rod Brindamore. 3-1 Flyers. The Flyers' defense and checking was just amazing in this game, and Dale was playing that role as well. An empty netter by Desjardins iced it in the end, and the Flyers have a 3-0 series lead. Dale Hawerchuk played one of the best games of his career in the playoffs with 3 points, the heart of a line every time he played a shift. He's just one game away from winning his first second-round series game for the Flyers. Fans had the brooms out signaling sweep. Buffalo led 1-0 in the first, and then Yanni Nienema to Dale to Darius Zubris for the goal. The game is tied 1-1 after one. In the second period, vintage Dale. A loose puck leads to him going in on goal to score to give the Flyers a 2-1 lead. His second goal this series and these playoffs. The 30th playoff goal of his career. Philly clung on to that lead. Going into the third, things got crazy. 2 goals 54 seconds apart gave Buffalo a lead. The Flyers tied up, and the Sabres again took the lead. And with 6:34 left, the LOD line struck as Lindros and Leclerc set up Renberg to tie it off to OT. But Ed Ronan becomes the hero and keeps the Sabres in the series in a shocking win. Dale, however, once again played tremendously. Game 5 in Buffalo, there were no goals, and Dale was having a rough night. But in the second period, it jumped out to a huge 3-0 lead, and the Sabres cut the gap to a goal, and both teams traded one more as it was 4-3 Flyers in the second. Podine made it 5-3, and how amazing is this? The clock is counting down. With 12 seconds left, Zubris ices the game. The clock is now ticking. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1-0. Dale Hawerchuk, at long last, wins a second-round series, and he and his Flyers are going to the Eastern Conference Final. It took 16 long years, and Dale now finds himself a step closer to the promised land, and man alive did he earn it in this series. 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points, including that incredible performance in Game 3, as well as shining in Game 4. He was playing like a man who wanted to win it all and will use everything he has left and more to do it. His heart in this series was truly an inspiration to his team, and his 6 points tied Brindamore for the lead amongst Flyers players. Well, no doubt Dale is excited to play in the conference final for the first time, but he wants to go beyond. Oh boy. Awaiting the Flyers in the conference final, the New York Rangers. And now, another ghost, or shall I say, 2 in fact, floating around the legacy of Dale Hawerchuk. Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky. The 2 former Oilers, both 36 years old, were still playing amazing hockey. Gretzky still finished in the top 5 in scoring. Messier had 84 points in 71 games. And again, from 1983 to 88, Gretzky and Messier together went 18-1 against Hawerchuk's Jets in the playoffs, winning all 5 series. And of course, Dale missed 4 of those games in 1985, as that memory of his injury and missing that series still makes people wonder what might have been. Even after Gretzky left the club in 1990, Dale and the Jets blew a 3-1 series lead in the opening round against Messier's Oilers in what was Dale's last games in Winnipeg, as the Oilers went on to win the Cup yet again. Now, Dale hasn't faced either of them in the playoffs since leaving Winnipeg, but now this may be his very last chance at redemption. The Rangers had 86 points and beat out the Panthers in 5, and then actually shocked the favored Devils in 5 in the next round. Wayne is red hot once again as he looks for Cup ring number 5, while Messier searches for a lucky number 7 in terms of Stanley Cup rings. Also on this team is popular Ranger Adam Graves, as well as multi-time All-Star left winger Luc Robitaille, also Nicholas Sundstrom, veteran Pat Flatley and Russ Courtnall, and another former Oiler who haunted Dale in the 80s and the early 90s, Esa Tikkanen. Leading the defense was former Norris Trophy winner, one of the game's best blue liners in the 90s, Brian Leach. Also, they had reliable Alexander Karpatsev, Jeff Here Comes the Boom Boom, and former New Jersey Devils longtime fan favorite Bruce Driver. And to top it off, the dirtiest player in the game, Ulf Samuelsson. However, backstopping them in net, Mike Richter. And you know what? This will be the last time, in any way, shape, or form, Dale would share the ice with the 2 men he called teammates on Team Canada 3 times each. Heated rivals where he was when they were in Edmonton. But above all, they were his respected peers. Game 1 in Philly, the Flyers are in sync. Our hero gets into the face-off circle with his longtime acquaintances and occasionally gets the better of them. The night, however, belongs to Lindros. His 3 assists give the Flyers a 3-1 lead. They take Game 1. Game 2, however, does not go the Flyers' way. Dale is again out there running with the gas he still has in his tank and playing through the pain, but Gretzky notches the hat trick, gives the 5-4 Rangers win, and the series is tied. Game 3, we shift to MSG in New York, and Dale is visibly sore, showing the anguish that he had in the opening round. The Flyers had a 2-0 lead after 1 and carried it all the way to second intermission. 2 Cardinal goals in the third tied it for the Rangers. Lindros and Gretzky exchange goals. It's tied at 3, but Klatt and Brindamore score. Eric completes his hat trick, 1-upping Gretzky, and the Flyers take a 2-1 series lead. Game 4 still in the Big Apple, and power play. First period, Choppy starts the engine. Dale steps on that gas, and Reddenberg cranks it into overdrive. It's a goal, 1-0. It stays that way after both first and second intermission. It's tied 2-2, however, as time is winding down, but a goal with Lindros with 7 seconds left gives the Flyers a very dramatic win in a 3-1 series lead. 1 win away. Dale Hawerchuk is 1 win away from a place he has never been close to in his great career. Game 5. Core State Center is shaking to its foundation in anticipation. The Flyers haven't been to a cup final since 1987, and Ron Hextall, who's the playoff MVP that year, is in net for this one. Dale keeps getting in the way of Gretz and Mess and doing everything he can out there to make sure he can make sure this win happens. The Flyers led 3-2 after 1 and 2 periods. The Root nearly came out the place, however, 6:43 in the third when Brindamore scored, and the Flyers were playing very smart, protecting their lead. Is this really happening? The clock keeps winding down. I can only imagine what Dale was feeling at the time. 1 minute to play. The Flyers are still in control of the game. 30 seconds. The anticipation is growing. 10 seconds. A dream is about to become reality. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The Philadelphia Flyers and Dale Hawerchuk are going to the Stanley Cup. 16 years of highs, lows, triumph, hardships, false hopes, success, blood, sweat, tears, heart, soul, heartbreak, and warrior spirit. Dale Hawerchuk is about to get his chance. Now you could tell the Sabre series and the effort he put in that one took a little something out of him and was, but he was still good in close checking situations and indeed at times made things difficult for the Stars and the Rangers. The 2 men who he had suffered so many losses to so many times, he has finally overcome them. In 1985, Dale had to wash from his seat as his defeated and great Jets team that year had to shake the hands of the winning Oilers. And Dale himself had to shake their hands in that Gretzky 4 times and Messier 5 in that handshake line, having to clean out his locker the next day. And despite his utmost respect for them, it had to feel pretty good to be on the other side of the handshake line and walk through the corridor a winner. For many fans of his and those who still loved him, they thought this was simply a pipe dream after a while, even just over a year ago. When he was drowning in St. Louis, a chance for the Stanley Cup seemed like a dream that would never come true for Dale Hawerchuk. Born in the city of Toronto, despite not spending long there, it's only fitting he's born in a storied hockey town and moves to Oshawa, another town that loves its hockey, growing up wearing skates more than he did shoes. As a child on his TV screen, seeing the images of Leaf legends such as Dave Keelan, Darryl Sittler, Lanny McDonald, and Boreas Salming, one day dreaming of sharing an ice surface with them, and indeed he did just by that, playing against them, having some of the biggest games and moments of his career in that famous arena where he watched them play. From becoming a junior sensation in Cornwall to being deemed a generational talent, which led him to become an icon in Winnipeg, a power play savior in Buffalo, tumultuous time in St. Louis, to showing flashes of his old self in Philly, he likely knows his body is breaking down, but he'll run on empty if he wants to achieve the game's biggest prize, the Stanley Cup. It all comes down to this. The team standing in the Flyers' way for the Stanley Cup final is the Detroit Red Wings, who've been the dominant force in the league for 5 seasons now, but they are victims of a shocking playoff upset Stanley Cup final 2 years prior, and the last season, despite winning a then NHL record of 62 games, they were beaten in the conference final by Colorado. The journey to finally get here wasn't easy. It took them 6 games to beat Brett Hull and the Blues in the opening round, but then were able to sweep the Ducks and avenge their loss last year to Colorado, who had the NHL's best record, beating them in a violent yet exciting 6-game series. Steve Yzerman, the team captain and all-star, like Dale, had put up Hall of Fame numbers and was only drafted 2 years after he was. And just like him, he was being counted to take a dead franchise and revive hope among the organization and its fans. And he has done just that. But now in his 14th season, he seeks what Dale has sought out and has worked every bit as hard to get there. And he too went through false hopes, setbacks, issues with the organization. But the difference is the Wings are closer than the Jets could ever get to the Stanley Cup. The two were teammates and on fire in the '89 World Championships for Team Canada, but now they square off for something they've waited what seems like an eternity for. The Wings added what they felt was the missing piece of their puzzle, power forward Brendan Shanahan, who Dale sometimes lined up with at the '91 Canada Cup. But head coach Scotty Bowen and his experience of 6 Stanley Cup rings implemented a system of hockey that left heads spinning for the core known as the Russian Five, led by all-star forward Sergei Fedorov, as well as Soviet icon Igor Larionov, and the trusted Slava Kozlov, as well as hard-hitting on defense Vladimir Konstantinov, and then another Red Army icon, Slava Fetisov. Also, the likes of Chris Draper, Darren McCarty, Kirk Maltby, and sometimes even Joe Koster brought whole new meaning to the term grind line. Also, you had role players like Martin Lapointe, Doug Brown, and former All-Star Thomas Sandstrom lent a lot of substance to this club. Also on the defensive core, you had the amazing Nicholas Lidstrom, as well as veteran Bob Rouse, and acquired late in the season, 17-year veteran and All-Star Larry Murphy, who has a couple Stanley Cup rings as it is. In net, the veteran Mike Vernon, who Dale is very familiar with from the times the Jets faced off against the Flames, especially in the playoffs in '86 and '87. The Flyers hadn't won a cup since 1975, a team which Hall of Famer and current GM Bob Clark had captained. The Wings had last won a cup in 1955 and had the longest run in the league. Here we go. Game 1 at the Core State Center in Philadelphia. Dale's first game in the Stanley Cup Final, but it's not going well. The Wings led 2-1 after the first period and then 3-2 in the second. Dale has been largely ineffective this game, and Vernon is fantastic in net. The Red Wings take it. Game 2, Dale's ice time is limited, but he's showing a little more hustle in this outing. The Wings led 2-0, but 2 goals from Brindamore tied it. It's 2-2 after 1. But Vernon is again tremendous in net. The Wings get goals from Maltby and Shanny. And the Flyers lose Paul Coffey for the series, and the Flyers trail 2-0 in this final. This is bad. Game 3 in Detroit. A terrible night for Dale and the Flyers. Our hero was a -2 and getting nothing going even defensively. The Wings are just too dominant. To make matters worse, Dale runs afoul of Vladimir Konstantinov, who completely nails him with a monster hit, and he's out of the game in the series with a concussion. The Flyers lost the game 6-1 and are now on the verge of being swept. And that's what happened. Despite a much better effort, the Flyers would lose 2-1 in Game 4, and the Red Wings won their first Stanley Cup in 42 years. As hard as he worked to get there, it was over just too quickly for our hero, and it was not the way he wanted to go out, or the way the Flyers wanted to either. The Wings were simply unstoppable in these playoffs, and Dale would actually go on to see a specialist regarding his hip issues. Doctors told him it's not going to hold up anymore if he continues to play hockey. And after 16 seasons, he announced his retirement. In his final season, Dale had 12 goals, 22 assists for 34 points in 51 games, and the wealth was very much spread out. He still worked a fair bit with Lindros and Leclerc before his injury issues. Nearly a third of Dale's assists were on Leclerc's goals, while both Leclerc and Lindros assisted 3 times each on Dale's goals, tying defenseman Eric Desjardins and Yanni Niinema, and other star forward Rod Brindamore. And Niinema also tied Trent Klatt, who Dale was shifted with often, for 3 assist collaborations each. Alas, our hero's NHL journey has come to an end. He officially announced his retirement on August 25th, 1997, just 2.5 months after the season ended. His final year may not have gone his way for many reasons, the significant injury issues, of course, above all, but he did play some great games, including his 15th and final hat trick, playing one more All-Star game and scoring a goal in the process. His determination to be a winner has to be admired. He won his first second-round playoff series in epic fashion. He kept his motor running until it could literally go no more, and he has nothing to be ashamed of. He made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Final, and he can at least say he made it to the big show. And think of many of his peers, Hall of Famers, Marcel Dion, Bernie Federko, Peter Stastny, Michel Goulet, Mike Gardner, and Matt Sundin, who never made one finals appearance. At least he experienced the thrill, despite the heartbreak in the end. Dale still went out a true competitor, and would have no doubt kept going if he could have, but in the world of sports, it's the condition of your body that ultimately tells you it's time. He only spent parts of 2 seasons in Philadelphia, but his value to the team was appreciated by those in charge, as well as his teammates. Even when his injuries were catching up with him, and he finally got to play at the Stanley Cup Final, not to mention being put together with the most exciting forward line in the game at the time, and playing one more All-Star game and being on the winning side for the first time, it had to be something special. Plus, spending time with many of his peers and the up-and-coming talent had to be a nice feeling. In 67 games in Philadelphia, he scored 16 goals, 38 assists for 54 points. Not bad at all. He made an immediate impact upon his trade there. And despite how things ended, one thing remained from that young superstar from Winnipeg: his competitive fire and desire to play the best he possibly could. It's been a common theme in this video series that Dale never truly got the respect he had earned, or the same adoration some of his peers got. Now, I know guys who I named earlier who never even played in a Stanley Cup Final weren't put on the same level as stars, obviously, as Gretzky, Messier, Lemieux, Yzerman, or Sakic, but it seemed as though they still had a bigger light shine on them than Dale ever did. It could have been the teams he played for, who knows. I mentioned the likes of Sundin, Gardner, and Fedorko as prime examples of players get a great deal of recognition for their careers, and deservedly so, but again, they never even made it to the finals. And just for fun, however, I want to look into the goalies that Dale victimized the most throughout his career, 518 goals. Well, first and foremost, Hall of Famer Grant Fuhr was on the receiving end of the most, as Dale scored on him 19 times. The two entered the league same year, and again, were from the same draft class, 1981. And despite the Oilers getting the better of the Jets more often than not in games, Dale often got the better of his draft class peer. And Fuhr's teammate Andy Moog got lit up 17 times. Moog, who in my opinion should be a Hall of Famer, was one of the best goalies of his era, and Dale faced him many times both during the division rivalry between Winnipeg and Edmonton, and then Buffalo and Boston later on, the latter of which Moog played for 6 seasons. Dale scored his first goal on Moog early in the 82-83 season. And I didn't mention this earlier because I want to save it for now, but Dale's very last goal of his career on January 21st, 1997 against the Dallas Stars was scored on Andy Moog. Dale also scored on Canucks goaltender Richard Brodeur 17 times, I should say, like he did on Moog. And let's face it, Brodeur was everybody's whipping boy in the Smythe division in the 80s. Don Beaupre, another resident whipping boy through the 80s, Dale scored on him 12 times, but oddly enough, the majority of those goals came during Beaupre's best years, which were with the Washington Capitals in the late 80s into the early 90s. He also scored 11 goals on Reggie Lemelin, mostly during Lemelin's time with the Flames, as Lemelin had a very long career. He scored 10 goals on 6 different goalies. Mike Liut, despite not being a Hall of Famer, was one of the best goalies of his time, and a former Ted Lindsay Award winner, then known as the Pearson Trophy, as Players' Choice MVP in 1981. He's been a finalist for the Vezina as well as the Hart Trophy, and a couple times he was an All-Star. Rick Wamsley, who had a pretty long career, Dale played against him a lot when Wamsley played for the Flames as a backup to Vernon. Bob Jancic, not a famous goalie, he was an LA Kings whipping boy for a while, and Dale got to him 10 times as well. Clint Malarchuk and Ken Riggett both had long NHL careers, while Ron Hextall, like Mike Liut, not quite a Hall of Famer, but there was a period of time where he was one of the best of his era, and Dale still got to him quite a bit despite not being in the same division. The year 2000 was Dale's first year of eligibility in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and he was passed over. Despite only 2 in the players category, Denny Savard and Joe Mullen, being inducted, this overlooking of him was just inexcusable, and sadly, once again, his lack of respect continued with this process. But the very next year, the mistake was rectified, and Dale Hawerchuk was indeed enshrined into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2001, taking his rightful place among the NHL all-time greats. On April 5, 2007, he was inducted into the Phoenix Coyotes Ring of Honor. Okay, now for those younger fans who may be confused who watch this series, the original Winnipeg Jets became the Coyotes in 96-97. So that team's lineage and history and their stats are now with the Coyotes, where today's Jets are from the origins of the ill-fated Atlanta Thrashers. And there is a Winnipeg Jets Hall of Fame honoring, and try to keep up with me, honoring players of the original Jets franchise, and Dale was inducted in 2017. Also, the Buffalo Sabres honored Dale by inducting him in their Hall of Fame in 2012. However, in 2017, Dale was left out the 100 greatest players of all time, which definitely stirred a bit of controversy, as many players who achieved less than him made that list. In the 2010-2011 season, Dale Hawerchuk became the head coach of the Barrie Colts of the Ontario Junior Hockey League, well, OHL. He led the team to 4 first-place finishes and coached the team for 9 seasons with a record of 305, 269, and 38. In 2019, however, he had announced he was taking a leave of absence from the team. It was revealed that he had been diagnosed with stomach cancer. In April of 2020, he underwent a round of chemotherapy. On August 18, 2020, however, he lost his battle. He passed away at the age of 57. He is survived by his wife Crystal and their 3 children. Tributes poured out all over the news and social media by former teammates, peers, and of course, fans. His life came to a premature end, but his legacy is still very much alive. And while the term bring them their flowers while they're living does ring true, even though Dale is gone, he deserved the appreciation perhaps he was lacking throughout his career no matter when it happened. Sometimes it was a matter of circumstance as to why Dale didn't get the recognition he deserved, but when you look at this picture, I mean, how does he not deserve it? Just like anyone else in this era. From the moment he was drafted first overall in 1981, he was seen as something special after all the accomplishments in his junior career. From the get-go, the youngest player to reach 100 points in the season, a record that stood for 24 years, winning the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie. He would then go on to have 6 100-point seasons, finishing in the top 10 and scoring 4 straight seasons. He was a second-team All-Star and runner-up for the Hart Trophy as league MVP in that glorious 84-85 season, and he played in a total of 5 NHL All-Star games. Also in his 9 seasons in Winnipeg, he won the team's Molson Cup Trophy as our top end-of-game 3-star point getter, and again, he won it 6 times. He also led the Jets in scoring every season he played there, all 9. 3 of his 5 seasons in Buffalo, he did the same, totaling 12 times in 16 seasons. He led his team in scoring. 15 hat tricks, the record of 5 assists in a period that stood for nearly 40 years and was recently tied. His leadership was trusted so much that he became the team captain of the Jets for 6 seasons, and then was an alternate captain in 4 of 5 seasons in Buffalo, meaning he wore a letter on his sweater for 10 of 16 seasons. His time in Buffalo was best known for how he became an important wheelman on the power play. So much so he was in the top 10 for power play goals on ice for twice. And in his career, however, he did it 5 times, including 83, 85, and 88 for the Jets. Some say the reason for his lack of appreciation is due to his lack of playoff success, but of course there are many reasons for that. It didn't fall on him completely. At times, Dale would play really well in the few playoff games he played, and overall he had 99 points in 97 playoff games in his career. In his final year, he made it to the Stanley Cup Final. But again, I mentioned how Mike Gardner, Matt Sundin, and some of those others, Peter Stastny, who never even played in a final, seem to get more respect, and those guys made the 100 greatest players of all time. He may have never won the Cup, but he did win 2 major professional sports championships in his career. Those 2 Canada Cups in 87 and 91. Played great in both tournaments involving his game. His memorable performance as player of the game in Game 3 of those iconic finals against the Soviets in 87, winning that face-off that led to Gretzky and Lemieux's infamous play. Had a silver medal in the 1989 World Ice Hockey Championships, where he also played great. The 2 bronzes in 82 and 86, and he played for the NHL All-Stars in Rendezvous 87 against the Soviet team. And above all else, an icon in the city of Winnipeg, forever in the hearts of fans who watched and idolized him. So much so, a statue of Dale Hawerchuk now stands in the shadow of the Canada Life Center where the current Winnipeg Jets play. Tell me that a man with 518 goals, 891 assists, totaling 1,409 points, and 1,188 NHL games isn't someone who belongs to the 100 greatest players in NHL history. But despite it all, Dale just seemed happy to accomplish what he did, and was happy to play professional hockey, and through it all, he did with determination and above all, class. That does it for our 4-part look at the great career of Dale Hawerchuk. Thanks for watching. What other players would you like to see us cover on this channel? Leave a suggestion in the comments, and until then, like and share the video, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya.